Howdy, 8th grade. Today we are going to look a little bit more at our factoring trinomials, and we're going to do a little bit harder. So we kind of started off with this reverse foiling thing a little bit easier last time. This we're going to make it a little harder. So last time we looked at this number right here, it was always 1. We're going to go over that a couple times just for review. Today we're going to have it where it's not equal to 1. So what I want to start off with is going to be factoring with this equal to 1 again for some quick review. So for review, if I have something that looks like x squared plus 7, 7x plus 12, what I would want to do is look right here and ask myself, what can I do to add to this number? And also look right here and ask myself what I can do to multiply to this number. So I need two numbers that add to 7, multiply to 12. A little bit of thinking there, I can figure out that 3 and 4 add to 7, multiply to 12, and I'll get x plus 3, x plus 4 equals x squared plus 7x plus 12. And if we go through and we factor this out, we'll find exactly that this is true. So x times x, if I FOIL this, it's going to be x squared. Outer is x and 4, which is 4x. Inner is 3 and x. And last is 3 and 4, which is 12. So x squared plus 3x and 4x make 7x plus 12. And this and that are the same, which means we're good to go. So that was a lot of what we did last time. I also showed you guys a nifty trick for solving some easy problems when that first number isn't 1. So if we have something that looks like 2x squared plus 12x plus 5, not 5, that should be a 10. I'm sorry about that. Let's write that as a 10. How I would solve this is by factoring out this 2. So if I factor out this 2, the way I do that is by doing a factor tree of each. This is 2 times x squared, 12x. I know I'm only going to be able to pull out a 2, so I'm just going to make this a 2 times 6x. And 10 is going to be 2 times 5. I know I can pull this 2 out. It's going to have 2 times x squared plus 6x plus 5. And now I need numbers that are going to add to 6, multiply to 5. That's going to give me x plus 5 and x plus 1. And the reason that works is 5 times 1 is 5, and 5 plus 1 is 6. So all I did there was I factored out the number in front of my x squared, and by doing that I had a trinomial here where there was no number in front of the x squared. So there's no number right there. It's just a 1. And if there's a 1 here, then we know how to do that pretty easily. So in some cases, you can do this fun little trick where you pull that number out, and that works. But some cases, like the ones we're going to look at today, we can't quite do that. So let's look at what we're going to have to do. This is where factoring starts being more of an art than a science, and we have to start kind of messing with it a little bit to make it work. So if we have, just a quick example, 2x squared plus 7x plus 5, and I want this to be put into parentheses like this. I'm thinking, well, how am I going to do this? I can't pull a 2 out because these numbers are both odd, which makes my life a little more difficult. So I can't pull a 2 out. I have to make this 2x squared inside of my parentheses. So that has to be in here somewhere. And the only way I can do that is if I have a 2x and an x. So the only way to get to 2x squared would be with a 2x times x. That's 2x squared. So now I have a bit of a different problem. I still need numbers that are going to multiply to 5, but I need them to end up combining to make 7x. So I have 2x times this number. When I FOIL it out, 2x will be multiplied by this number here, times a number. I'm going to call that number 1. And then I'm going to add that to x times this number, which I'll call number 2. And I have to get from there up to 7x. And then my two numbers here, number 1 and number 2, have to multiply to 5. So number 1 times number 2 has to get to 5. So there's no real easy way to do this. I like to start with the multiplication here, because if we're multiplying to 5, there's only one way to do that, and that's 1 times 5. So I need a 1 and a 5 somewhere. So I could maybe put the 1 here and the 5 there. But if I do that, I have 2x times 5 is 10x. 1 times x is 1x, and 10x plus 1x is going to be 11x, and that's not what I want. So it can't go that way. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 1 here and the 5 here. So I have 2x times 1 is going to be 2x, and 5 times x is 5x, and 2 and 5 is 7. So that should work out. I'm going to do it longhand real quick so y'all can see exactly what I'm talking about. So I knew I needed to use the numbers 1 and 5 because my two numbers had to multiply to 5 here. That's the only way to do it. And it works out this way because when I FOIL, I have 2x times x is my first, which is 2x squared. Outer is 2x times 1, which is going to be 2x. Inner is 5 and x, which is 5x. And last is 5 and 1, which is 5. I can add these up. I get 2x squared plus 2x and 5x is 7x plus 5. And just like that, I have the 2x squared plus 7x plus 5 that I wanted up here. Oof. So this is a little bit crazy, I know, but there's going to be a lot of different ways that we can make this work. So I want to look at a couple more problems. Let's do here. If I have 6x squared minus 11x plus 3. If I want to factor this, it's going to be a little bit harder because there's a few different ways I can make a 6x squared. And the different ways I can make a 6 are going to be 2 and 3, or I could do 6 and 1. I'll write that down. So I could either do 2 times 3 or 6 times 1. So I'm going to write out both of those. It's either going to be 2x and 3x, or 6x and x. And I'm not quite sure which one yet. I also know that my second numbers are going to have to multiply to 3. So my second numbers multiply to 3. And that's going to make my life a little bit easier because that means that my second numbers, 3 goes only to 3 and 1. So I can either have a 3 here or a 1 here, a 1 or a 3 and a 1, 1 and a 3. I've also got this negative sign, which means I'm probably going to be subtracting something, which is going to make my life a little bit more interesting, but that's okay. We'll make it work. So if I have a negative sign, I know if it's all negative, it won't work. So if I'm multiplying to positive 3 still, since I'm multiplying to positive 3, and I need to end up with a negative addition, to do that, I'm going to have 2 negatives, because if I had one negative and a positive, I would end up having a negative number right here. So because this 3 is positive, that means that either both of these are going to be addition or both are subtraction. Because this is subtraction, that means I'm going to have 2 different subtraction signs. So I figured out a good chunk of this. I'm either going to have 2x minus something and 3x minus something, or I'm going to have 6x minus something and x minus something. Let me erase all these marks I've been using so you can get a better look at this. So right now, I have that either I'm going to have 2x minus 3 times 3x minus 1, 2x minus 1 times 3x minus 3, 6x minus 3, x minus 1, or 6x minus 1, x minus 3. There's like 4 different possibilities, but I can check those, figure out which one's going to work. So going through here, I'm going to start looking at this 2 and the 3. So if I multiply, and just for example, I'm going to pick a couple and do the 2x minus 3 times 3x minus 1. And I know this is going to give me my 6x squared and my plus 3. So I'm good to go on all those counts. All I need to figure out is this minus 11x. So negative 3 times 3x is going to be negative 9. And 2x times negative 1 is going to be negative 2. And negative 9x minus 2x is negative 11x. Just like that, I have found the one I need. So this is going to be my solution. And if I FOIL that, I will get 6x squared minus 11x plus 3. Which is kind of crazy. But that's how this all works. So I know this is going to be a lot of very weird stuff to kind of get in your mind to think a different way, and that's all right. But before we get too far into it, because I know this is a hard topic, a lot of you guys ask, why is this important? And this is actually one of the most useful skills that we will find. So a lot of times we'll want to figure out where an equation equals 0. That's a huge thing, finding it in math. It's called the roots of the equation. You'll learn that later. But if we have an equation like this, where it says, and I'll do an easy one for this, x squared plus 3x, which meaning we're adding to 3, and let's multiply to 2. Should make our life pretty easy, and let's say that equals 0. So if I have x squared plus 3x plus 2 equals 0, I know my goal is to get x by itself. I'm solving for x, but I have an x squared here, and I have an x here. That makes it really hard to do anything with it. Because if I'm trying to get this x by itself, well, it's squared right now, so to undo that, I could, if I wanted to, divide both sides by x. So I'm going to erase this whole thing in a minute. But let's try dividing both sides by x. I would end up with x plus 3 plus 2 over x equals 0. And this is just as unhelpful as where I started. So that's not going to work for us. If we try some other things, there's just generally no way to get an x by itself. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to factor this. And if I factor this, I will get, I need an x and an x, and I need two numbers that are going to add to 3 and multiply to 2. And that's going to be a 2 and a 1. So 2 plus 1 is 3, 2 times 1 is 2. Good to go. And if I do this, this still equals 0. So now I've got a number here. This whole thing is a number, and it's multiplying another number, and that has to equal 0. So when I have something times something equals 0, the only time that ever happens is if one of these is 0. So now I know that either x plus 2 equals 0 or x plus 1 equals 0. And from that, I can say that either x equals negative 2, just by subtracting 2 from both sides, or from this equation, I have x equals negative 1, just by subtracting 1 from both sides. So this is where this kind of comes in handy. I know we've just been doing this without really seeing the finish line quite so much, but this is going to be very, very useful in the future. So this is the big why. This is why this factoring is the easiest way to do this. Factoring is fun. So knowing that, I hope that gives us a little bit more motivation to try to play with these puzzles. I always think factoring's like puzzles. I think it's a bunch of fun. I know that makes me weird. I'm okay with it. In any case, I would really appreciate you guys. There's 6 different things to practice factoring on the lesson practice. So if y'all could go through that and work that out for me, I would be much obliged. I will see y'all tomorrow.